We are discussing my favorite brand. We're also discussing my favorite design execution from my favorite brand, so what could go wrong? I think it's safe to say that the unexpected success of the Speedmaster 57 is unexpected. Considering the fact that this is not your regular Speedmaster, this is an offshoot from the professional collection. Considering its history and its past, it's never been a really successful formula until now. I made a video about 8 months ago on the channel about the green seaweed Seamaster, and that model was really the flagship to the discussion. At the very end, I focused on the 57 Speedmaster and said that I thought it was the most beautiful rendition of this watch they've ever done. And in fact, it's the unsung hero. It's the real sleeper of the new releases that the brand offered. It seems that a few people took that to heart because half a year later, this has become one of the most popular models that Omega now has. There are a few good reasons why, which I hope to expand on, not only discussing its design, why I think it's so significant and great as a modern vintage interpretation, as well as the fact that it's just excellent to see that this watch is getting time in the spotlight. Maybe it's just me, but I'm seeing this slow increase in interest and popularity around the broad arrow design. And it really is something fantastic, something unique and original to Omega that deviates far away from its competitors. So where to begin with these watches? I mean, you could start by talking about the CK2915 and that whole collection, the Trilogy collection. We've done that more than enough times. Let's just look at the CK collection of watches that Omega has in their current lineup. The CK859 is an example of a piece that was a great surprise when it arrived. An even greater surprise when rumors were starting to be spread that the watch had been discontinued. As far as I know, it hasn't been. It's just a limited production. Then you look to earlier models that use the CK case, like the first Omega in space, the FOIS. I mean, that has always been a very popular watch. How about the handful of limited edition CK2998 models that also followed in the footsteps of the first Omega in space? Many of which took these classic design cues but also blended a bit of modernity in there too. But of course the main model, the Ed White 321 caliber, that watch continues to be popular, and I mean, it's a work of art. Before even talking about dial configurations, all of these little executions, the case and the flat link bracelet has made this watch so prominent. I think that's largely also the reason for its success, especially because a lot of these watches generally are under 40 millimeters in diameter. So not only are you getting a comfortable bracelet and a great looking case, you're also getting a watch that is smaller in size and profile. All of these little factors add up to a few things, turns it into a great everyday wearer. It's a watch that can be worn on a large portion of wrists, but at the same time its design at its core, when we look to the bracelet and case, belongs to Omega. And it seems to be more often than not, when you have a CK in front of an Omega reference, seems to win people over. Now before this release of the new Co-Axial 57, there was an earlier generation, I believe released between 2010 and 2012. And these models were given the nickname the George Clooney because he was seen promoting and advertising them for a very long time. And believe it or not, he is still doing it today. So the question is, why are so many people talking about this watch? Why is there so much increased interest in this model line? There's one area that I don't think is often discussed, and that's the fact that the Speedmaster Professional, it's kind of cliched. Don't get me wrong, it's a fantastic watch, and I mean when it comes to choosing top 10 best watches ever created, Speedmaster sits right up there at the top of the category. But so many people have this watch, this design, this configuration in one way or another. And while yes, it has so many modern technological advancements like the 3861 caliber, applied Omega logo on the dial, all sorts of little elements that call back to the classics. But for a lot of people out there, I think this watch still lacks that tiny point of difference. As much as it is an evolution of the earlier model, it still looks just the same, realistically. And I think a few other issues that get in the way of this watch and the experience is that it's 42 millimeters in diameter, and the movement case back, it's quite a thick watch. So to counter that, to look to the traditional side, looking at the straight lugs, the flat link bracelet, a slimmer profile of 12.99 millimeters, a diameter of 40.5 millimeters, and a design that does not immediately scream to you that it is a Speedmaster. This is all playing in the 57's favor. So then we get to its design. Words like elegance, balance, simplicity sums up this piece nicely. It is so under the radar, but is also a technical powerhouse when you look at the caliber 9906. A manual winding movement with a 60-hour power reserve, a date complication at the 6th position. The ability to use the hour hand when you're jumping time zones. Instead of having to set the watch and stop the movement, you can do that independently. As well as the fact that this is a 12-hour column wheel chronograph that uses a bicompax dial arrangement. It's entirely unique. And just from a manufacturing, engineering point of view, when we look to the case back of this watch, it's not very exciting. There's a huge bridge that covers the entire movement, but I believe this was done deliberately to make it extremely durable as a daily wearing piece. The fact that the movement is encased and fully protected means that none of the small components would ever come loose. It just adds to that rigidity and strength. Not only are you getting a META-certified coaxial movement that requires a lot less lubrication than your standard pieces, but it's also a column wheel chronograph. And the beauty really is in that simplicity, from the outside to the inside. The design is so simple and unoffensive, but at the same time it's an absolute powerhouse and would treat you so well as a daily wearing watch. And that's what I love most about the Broad Arrow collection, is it comes across unassuming, very unpretentious, but has so much to offer in the background. And then it's all the other small touches that only the diehard would see, like the fully brushed bezel instead of using a fully polished surface that the CK2915 did. The flat link bracelet and clasp, which tapers from 20mm down to 15, it's the best bracelet that the brand has ever created, and I am extremely jealous. I mean, mine is good, but it doesn't taper. It's 19mm all the way down. And the way that they have fixed the clasp on this model, far more faithful to the originals, it's a thing of beauty. So it definitely feels like no stone was left unturned when this piece was reinterpreted. And then when we turn our attention to the dial configurations, the use of olives and navy blues, burgundies, contrasting black used on the subdials, the outer minute track, the date window being framed properly. How when we look to the most faithful recreation of the 57 that has a bit of faded lume, it's a sandwich dial instead of your typical painted dial. And then when we look to the modern pieces, we see that all of those outer elements, like the plots, have been applied, as well as the Omega logo. We look to the pump pushers on the side of the case, the size of the crown, extremely well balanced, well set. And then it's down to the intuitive nature of being able to tell the time and to read the chronograph on this piece. The large broad arrow hand, lengthened so that it almost touches the hour plots. Then you look to that subdial on the right-hand side, being able to read it like you would a clock for 12 hours. It is such a smart way to design a chronograph, and Omega's technology here is on full display. Honestly, there's not enough praise that I could give this collection. I believe it was handled so well and deserves all the attention that it's getting. I have seen so many posts in recent months about people talking about this being their first Omega watch, the first piece that got them into this hobby, the first luxury watch, their first Omega. What a great way to start. The 57 stands on a knife edge of being something that's modern and also classically inspired, blending these two parts together so nicely that you get a watch that ends up being timeless in design, at the same time exhibiting Omega's watchmaking prowess. And that's the brilliance behind it. I look forward to the day that this watch debuts a white, sort of cream eggshell color on its dial, looking kind of similar to the Newman 6239 Daytona. It will be exceptional. And the success of a watch like this makes me proud as a Broad Arrow owner. I've been trying to say for years how great of a design it is, and finally I think people are starting to see the light. And it also goes to show, with an example of a watch like this, that simplicity outlasts complexity. This piece does not need to be complicated, that's all housed on the inside. The real beauty is that it encompasses this elegance of a luxury wristwatch, but could also pass so easily as a daily wearing piece, but remain timeless all the way. I could have spent another 20 minutes giving this watch all the praise. Maybe it's just me, it's just personal preference. I am biased, okay? But I love the fact that it's kind of under the radar still. It's not everyone's favorite. It's not your typical professional model. It's just so different, elegant. I love the bicompax arrangement. I find it ingenious being used on a chronograph. And all the many colors they offer now, I mean, that olive green is just something else.